All right, so we know about the cell theory now, so now we want to talk about plant versus animal cells. We want to talk about the structure of cells. In fact, we'll probably get to labeling diagrams of the cells today. All right. So what we need to know first off is how plant and animal cells are different. Okay. Also how they're similar. Okay. Why those differences are present and necessary. Okay. Based on how plants work and how animals work. Okay. And be able to correctly label plant and animal cells. Obviously, one of the big things for this unit would be if I gave you a diagram of a cell, you would be able to tell me what all the parts are and what they do. Okay. That's going to be a big part of it as well. All right. So if we're looking at a leaf here, okay, is a leaf made up of more than one cell? Yes, many, many cells. And because it is a multicellular organism, those cells are different. Okay, some of them do a certain job, some of them do a different job. We call that specialization. Okay, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about multicellular organisms, but that's one of the defining characteristics of being multicellular. Not that you have more than one cell, but that you have specialization. That is, some groups of cells in your body do this job and some groups of cells in your body do a different job. All right, and we can even see that a little bit in this diagram here. All right. Okay, so modes of nutrition, important 3 words. Okay, modes of nutrition is why plants and animals are different. Okay, why their cells look different. The way they get their energy is different, and the way you get your energy is your mode of nutrition. Okay. So there's lots of subtle differences between plant and animal cells, okay? And that has to do with the way they get their energy. If you're a plant, the raw materials that you require to survive are water, carbon dioxide, and not even oxygen. You can make your own. Sunlight. Yeah, you need those 3. I mean, you need more than that. You need minerals in the soil and stuff like that. But when it comes right down to it, those are the 3 things you got to have in order to survive. Light to power the process. Carbon dioxide is a raw source of carbon and oxygen, and water as a source of hydrogen to build sugars. Okay, those are the raw materials you need. If you are an animal, you need more than that. You need something to eat. Okay, there has to be something else around for you to consume for energy. Right? So which likely showed up first on Earth? Photosynthetic organisms or organisms that ate other things? Photosynthetic organisms. Okay, they had to be there first because there would have been nothing for an animal-like organism to eat. Okay, plants had to come first. They could make their own energy using the materials that would have been present, okay, on early Earth. All right. So does that sort of make sense? Okay. Now, plants are generally stationary. By generally, I mean they are. This is not the Lord of the Rings. Okay. It's not like they're not ants. They don't pick up and walk around and throw things. Okay. They just stay put and they carry out photosynthesis. Now, we already said that the resources they need are like water, carbon dioxide, and light. What do you suppose they have the most trouble getting? Well, yeah, situationally, it could be water or light. It depends on the situation. But I would say most of the time, light is a big deal. Okay? How do they make sure they're going to get light? They have to expose their leaves to the sun. Now, what if they grow in a thick forest? Maybe. Or they compete. I know it seems weird to think that a plant could compete, but it does. Okay? Plants compete with each other by trying to shade each other out. They do that by growing, bigger, taller. Okay? If I can be above the other things that are competing with me for light, I get the light first and I shade them and I win. Okay? And when we're talking about competition, that's life and death. Okay? It's a battle to the death for plants. It seems weird, but it's true. Okay? They are competing with other plants for the resources they require. Right? In the same way that animals, okay, compete for food. Okay? Well, plants have to compete for their resources as well. So they would get taller. Now, they can't move. That's the big thing, right? I mean, it would be great for a plant. It's like, oh man, everybody here is so tall. I'm just going to walk over here, okay, where there's less plants, plant myself, and I'll grow over here, and that'll be fine. They can't do that. Okay? They're rooted to one location, so they have to modify their structures, okay, in order to survive in those places. So their cells look different for that reason as well. Okay? Whereas animals, they have to be mobile. Okay? They can't have rigid, strong-edged cells because they wouldn't be very flexible. Right? They've got to be able to move. okay, and things like that. All right, so their cells are going to look different because of that. All right, so the first mode of nutrition we're going to talk about is chemoheterotrophs. Okay, that's the really technical way of saying things that eat other things. Okay, anything that eats something else is a chemoheterotroph, and that is a term that you will have to know. Okay, so the basis of that word is this: chemo means chemicals. Okay, hetero means others, and troph means feeder. Right, so this feeds off the chemicals from other organisms. Okay, chemoheterotroph, so it feeds off others. Okay. Now, some examples, obviously, big carnivores like a shark or a lion or something like that would be chemoheterotrophs, okay? But worms are chemoheterotrophs as well, okay? They eat lots of the junk that's in dirt. In fact, they eat dirt, okay? They just happen to be able to digest it, okay? And so they get organic material that can sustain them from the dirt, okay? Fungus, okay? A fungus is a chemoheterotroph. It actually eats other stuff. Okay, whatever it's growing on, it's eating. So if you see mold on bread, the mold is eating the bread. Okay, if you see mold growing on an orange, okay, incidentally, that stuff, that mold is penicillium. What do they make out of that? What does it sound like? Penicillin. Okay, you know how they discovered that mold could be used to make antibiotics? Spoiled oranges never had bacteria on them. Okay, they always had mold, but they never had bacteria. And it was because the mold was releasing a chemical that killed bacteria. It was a way to keep bacteria from eating its food. Okay, it didn't do it consciously, it's just something that evolved, and it produces this chemical, okay, that's an antibiotic, and it kills bacteria. Right, now, please don't, if you're getting sick, find some moldy orange going, don't do that, okay, because that doesn't work that way. It has to be processed, okay? Don't just lick a moldy orange and think you're going to get your dose of penicillin. Don't do that, okay? Fungus eat other organisms, okay? Or they eat dead organisms or organic material that's decaying on the ground, okay? So examples could be like you've got these basidiomycete fungus here, okay, that are just decomposing material on the ground, okay? Athlete's foot is a parasitic fungus that eats you. That's why it's itchy. Okay, it's itchy because it is actually digesting you. Okay, yeah, this is a nasty thought, but that's what it's doing. Okay, all fungus eat this way. Okay, their digestion is external. Okay, we consume food and the digestion occurs inside of us. Okay, but for a fungus, they release very similar digestive enzymes to what would be in our stomach and intestines, but they secrete them outside. Okay, and so they kind of grow into their food, excreting these digestive enzymes that break down the organic material or cells, okay, of their stuff, and then they just absorb the nutrients back in. So their digestion is external, which is why athlete's foot is itchy. It's actually the digestive enzymes digesting your cells, okay? So a parasitic fungus, that's how it works, right? You're probably all going, oh, my feet are so itchy right now. It gets in your head, right? Oh, literally, that also gets in your head. If you get dandruff, it's because of a scalp fungus. Okay. Yeah, we can scratch now. Okay, so anything that consumes another organism for food is a chemoheterotroph. So lots of bacteria are chemoheterotrophs. The ones that can make you sick, okay, strep throat, things like that, okay, those are all chemoheterotroph-like organisms, okay? They're consuming organic material for food. Okay, making sense there? All right, so with chemoheterotrophs, their cells have to have specific organelles that help them to do this. One of those specific organelles are lysosomes. Lysosomes are like the stomach of the cell. They're the part of the cell that makes digestive enzymes. Okay? Plants don't have these. Right? Even a Venus flytrap doesn't have these. Okay? Even a carnivorous plant does not have lysosomes. Because a plant doesn't digest food. Okay? Even a Venus flytrap, okay, it can secrete these digestive enzymes, but not in the same way. Okay, so we got lysosomes in there, and typically, does an animal cell have a cell wall? No. Okay, animal cells don't have cell walls, but fungus do. Okay, fungi actually do have cell walls because they grow kind of like a plant. Okay, they look that way, so they actually do have cell walls because they have to support themselves. Okay, whereas animals support themselves with either bones or something else, or shells or something like that. Okay. All right, so that's what lysosomes do. Okay, lysosomes, okay, they contain digestive enzymes, okay, that break down food molecules for energy. Right, that's their job. Okay, so they're really important for a chemoheterotroph. All right, so if we're looking at an animal cell, okay, things we need to know about animal cells, okay, they have to be somewhat plastic, okay, so animal cells have to be able to change shape, because an animal has to move, so there has to be an element of flexibility there, okay, that allow them to do that. Okay, so animal cells often contain fibrous materials within the cell. Okay, those fibrous materials are often called the cytoskeleton. Which is made up of microfibers, microtubules, and things like that. Okay, basically that's how an animal cell, keeps from rupturing when its shape changes, because it doesn't have a big cell wall, okay, to keep its shape. Its shape is supposed to change. Right? Muscle cells have way more of these fibrous materials in them than would, let's say, a nerve cell. Okay, in fact, that's what muscle fiber is. Okay, so if you've ever heard, like, when you work out, you break muscle fibers. Okay, you're breaking them, and then they heal back stronger, which usually means they also heal back a little bit bigger. Okay, things like that. So you're breaking them all the time. Okay, sometimes you even rupture the cells. Okay, if you rupture too many, what have you done? Strained a muscle, yeah, or in an extreme case, torn it completely. Okay, so if you like tear a ligament or tear a hamstring, okay, incidentally, that's like one of the most grotesque injuries you can ever see. It's a torn hamstring. It's right up there with a compound fracture. The hamstring rolls up into the glute. Okay, like those old projector screens, if you pull them down, they go up. That's what it looks like. Right up. It's really gross. Okay, and I would assume excruciatingly painful, since the guy I saw do it just laid on the floor and screamed. Yeah. Okay, so you don't want to do that. It hurts a lot, apparently. Okay. All right, so that would be, so animal cells are going to have a cytoskeleton, where plant cells are not going to have that. Okay, plant cells have this big, thick, strong cell wall that helps to support their shape instead. All right, and animal cells, okay, also animal cells have only a flexible membrane. Okay, so they have a cell membrane. Plant cells do too. Okay, they just don't have a cell wall outside of it. Okay, questions there? The other mode of nutrition is photoautotrophs. Okay, photo means light, auto means self, troph means feeding. Okay, so these are light self feeders. They can feed themselves with light, whereas chemoheterotrophs, chemicals from other things to feed you. Okay, so that's the difference in the names there. Right, so plants can produce their own food by capturing sunlight to remove carbon from CO2 and produce sugar for energy by photosynthesis. So photoautotrophs use photosynthesis, okay, in order to support themselves. Okay, now just to give you an idea here, you'll learn more about this in Bio 20, okay? But this reaction is, yeah, it's photosynthesis backwards, because it's cellular respiration. This is the process by which all organisms on Earth produce energy. They burn glucose in the presence of oxygen to release carbon dioxide and water. Okay? That is the process that goes on within all cells to release the energy stored in glucose. Okay? Photosynthesis works the other way. Okay? So when we have this, and there's actually plus energy. Okay? Whereas for photosynthesis, Plants take carbon dioxide, water, and energy, and they produce glucose and oxygen. Okay, this is the carbon cycle, if you've heard of that before, like in junior high. Okay, the carbon cycle says that as we produce glucose, okay, it becomes the raw materials for cellular respiration, which produce the raw materials for photosynthesis, and the cycle continues. Okay, so for plants, like we said, they can actually produce oxygen, so they don't even need it really as a raw material. Okay, so that's here, this is the carbon cycle, but I'm showing you more of a chemical part of that. Okay, so photoautotrophs use photosynthesis. So if we're looking at what the cells look like, the cells look quite a bit, I mean, there's a lot of similar structures still, but they look different in that they have chloroplasts. Okay, so the chloroplast is the organelle that carries out photosynthesis. Okay, it contains the chlorophyll, okay, and that's where all that stuff happens. All right, so plants have specialized organelles called chloroplasts, and because they have to support long stems and leaves, they have stiff cell walls and large vacuoles filled with water. Okay, those are unique structures to plants. Okay, the cell walls and the water vacuoles do the same job. They support the rigid shape of the cell. Okay? If you haven't watered a plant for a long time, what does it start to look like before it gets crunchy? Wilted. Yeah, it just kind of curls, right? Okay. The reason it does that is because it's relying on not just the cell wall, which is this orange part, but this water vacuole here. When that water vacuole is full, it's pushing everything against the cell wall. It's supporting it from inside, right? It would be like if you had like a water balloon, okay? If the water balloon is only partially full, it's quite easy to change its shape. But if you fill it to the point where it's just about to burst, it's very, very rigid, okay? And that's what the water vacuole does, is it acts as kind of a big bladder that pushes everything against the cell wall and helps the cell wall stay rigid. The cell wall on its own isn't rigid enough to support a plant, so the plant will wilt, okay? Now, if we're talking about a tree, trees' cell walls have a special protein in them that makes like the wood, okay, the tree trunk part, okay. But a typical kind of fleshy plant, okay, when they haven't been watered for a while, okay, they look wilted. In fact, I'll show you what that looks like. Because unfortunately, I watered all my plants the other day because they were looking wilted. Okay, so here's the plant I'm talking about here. Okay, see how, oh, I moved it over here. Right, that's kind of wilted looking. It moves around a lot. Okay, so here it's back. Okay, now just watch the leaves. You see them starting to slowly move upwards. Okay, because they were all kind of wilty and soft before, okay, and now they're starting to perk back up because I had watered them. Okay, that's not the plant growing. Okay, that's actually the plant's water vacuoles filling back up with water. I think that's, I can't see much change now, but if we go back, just watch them kind of sag here. You see them kind of sagging? Okay. As we go back, okay, down to very like wilted looking, right? You can see that the leaves look quite soft, especially there when it's on the table. It's all like saggy. Okay, everyone kind of follow me there? All right, so that's what they do. One of those serendipitous accidents. All right, so the water vacuoles have to be present. They're not present in animal cells, just in plant cells. Cell wall, same thing. Okay, now the cell wall, people get the wrong idea about the cell wall. They picture this like an actual solid wall, like what's on this room. Okay, the cell wall is actually not a wall like this. It's more like a frame. Okay, so if you ever watched a house being built, when they first put up the walls, you can walk through them. Okay, that's more like what the cell wall is like. It's really more of a frame than an actual wall. It doesn't protect the cell at all. Anything can get through it. All right, it's the cell membrane that acts like a border and determines what gets in and out. The cell wall, anything can get through it because it's full of holes. Okay. All right, what's the cell wall made out of? Cellulose. Okay, you might have heard that called fiber. Okay, at some point, right? It's why we're supposed to eat vegetables and things like that, okay? Because they contain fiber, okay? This cellulose stuff that all plant cell walls are made out of. Now, the weird thing about that is we don't have the digestive enzymes to get any energy out of fiber, okay? If you're a herbivore, like a deer or a cow or a moose, you do, but you have a four-chambered stomach and we don't, okay? But for us, eating that fiber doesn't give us any calories, but what does it do? What's fiber good for? Yes, it keeps you regular. That means it helps you poop. Okay, it acts like a big old brush, and if you eat lots of fiber, it goes through your digestive tract undigested. We can't break it down. So imagine like how like stringy and stuff like celery would be, you know, things like that. You can't break that down. You can chew it, but you can't chemically break it down. So it goes through you essentially unaltered. Corn does the same thing. There you go. There's a picture you won't forget. Okay, corn goes completely unaltered too. And because it's made of this stuff, it acts like a brush and it cleans out the inside of your intestines, which is good for you. You don't want pieces of partially digested food or feces to get stuck inside the folds, and there's lots of folds inside your intestines. So dietary fiber helps to keep your intestines essentially clean, okay, and working properly. If you get stuff stuck in there, then you can get, you know, all kinds of problems. You can get a bowel obstruction and stuff like that, which is bad. Okay, you don't want to have that. So, all right, so that's what fiber is for. Interesting side note there. All right, so plant versus animal cells. So they've got lots of similarities. If we're checking off similar structures, we'll use green here, okay? They both have a nucleus, they both have a nucleolus, okay? They both got rough ER, that would be this stuff here, okay? They both have a Golgi apparatus, that would be that thing, okay? They both have mitochondria, that would be that thing, okay? They both have a cell membrane, okay? That'd be the outside. They're both filled with cytoplasm. That would be another one. Okay. So they both have smooth ER. Okay. That would be right there. Okay. So lots and lots of similarities. And that's just structures. That's not even processes. Okay. The things that are different. Okay. Well, water vacuole, chloroplasts, cell wall, centrioles, and lysosomes. That's it. Okay, everything else is the same, but those differences have to do with how they get their energy. Lysosomes help digest food, chloroplasts help make food, right? So they're all to do with their modes of nutrition. Okay, so most of the things that they have in common have to do with intracellular transport, waste excretion, okay, things like that. All right, and we've already talked about this question from an evolutionary point of view. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, it means that they had a common ancestor somewhere in the distant past. Okay, what we know from kind of micropaleontology and things like that is that the first organisms on Earth were like some type of blue-green algae, okay, a very simple prokaryotic organism, okay, that could carry out some rudimentary form of photosynthesis. All right. So I want you guys to answer those questions, and then I think we'll have time to at least start the labeling, okay? So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes or so, okay, to get those questions answered, and then we'll go through them, and I'll pass out the cell diagrams for us to start labeling. For question number one, what's the main reason for differences between plant and animal cells? 3 words. Modes of nutrition, okay? Simple as that. It's their modes of nutrition. They get their energy different ways, so they need different structures for that. Okay, Number 2, what organelle supplies plants with energy and what process does it use? Okay, so there's kind of two answers for this one. The one that provides them with chemical energy is the chloroplast. It's what makes sugar. But in the end, it's also the mitochondria that burn the sugar. We haven't talked about those yet, so I wouldn't have expected you to necessarily know that one. Okay, for right now, we'll say it's the chloroplasts because that's where they get their glucose from. Okay. Similarly, in question number 3, the organelle that supplies animal cells with energy is the lysosome. That's the one that breaks down food and gives them glucose. So in this way, we're looking for what's their source of chemical energy, glucose. So for an animal, it's the lysosome, and for the plant, it's the chloroplast. Okay, question number 4. Transport within plant and animal cells is done in the same fashion. Essentially, it's by diffusion, which we'll talk about later. Okay, why would this have been kept the same, evolutionarily speaking, when so many other things have been altered? Why would cells still be using this 500 million, 750 million years later? Yeah, it works. Nothing better has come along. There's no better process that has appeared, okay, that transports materials more effectively than diffusion. The other big thing about diffusion is it's free. The cell doesn't require any energy to use it, okay, which is kind of a big deal. Number 5, the nutritional needs of plants and animals are very different. Which would have survived best in a primordial earth that had very little oxygen or organic material? Well, we kind of already talked about that one on the first slide. Definitely plants, because they could make their own oxygen and glucose, whereas an organism like an animal would need oxygen, it would need organic material to eat, okay, so it wouldn't survive. Okay, questions on any of those? Diffusion is just the natural process by which things move from high concentration to low concentration. It's why if someone farts on one side of the classroom, you smell it on the other. And it just moves from high concentration to low concentration. It's really bad if you're really close, but on the other side, not quite so bad, right? Because it thins out as it travels, yeah? All right. Diagrams. If you flip that sheet over that I gave you, the animal cells on the other side, we'll start with the animal cell. Okay, and we will start right here with this empty looking little vesicle here. There's actually lots of them in the cell. Okay, these empty little vesicles are called peroxisomes. They become lysosomes once food merges with them. Okay, a peroxisome contains digestive enzymes, but no food, so there's no digestion going on inside. Okay, these little like faded yellow stringy looking things are called microfibers, but we're not going to call them that. We're just going to call them, they're part of the cytoskeleton. Okay, similarly, this one down here would also be part of the cytoskeleton. These are microtubules, okay, but we'll just say cytoskeleton, that'll be good enough. Okay, so those are those fibrous materials that we talked about that keep an animal cell from rupturing most of the time. Okay, this orange sausage-shaped looking thing that there's a lot of, okay, usually in a cell, okay, these are the mitochondria. They burn sugar for energy. Sorry, write that very clearly. Okay, they burn sugar for energy or carry out cellular respiration. Now, weird thing about animal cell diagrams, they almost all contain this tail, which is odd because most animal cells don't have that. Okay, in fact, if you're female, you don't have any cells in your body that have that. Okay, if you're male, you have one set of cells that have that. Sperm cells. Okay, it's the flagellum, okay, that they whip back and forth in order to swim. Okay, we'll label it, but it isn't on very many animal cells. But it's on every diagram for some reason. All right, so we'll continue kind of clockwise around here. Okay, the outside of this purple thing here is called the nuclear membrane. Okay, it is a very special double layer membrane that protects the stuff that's inside the nucleus. Okay, basically it only allows things to exit the nucleus. Very little actually ever goes in to the nucleus because the nucleus contains your DNA, and if anything happens to that, your cell will die. Okay, because the DNA in there is where the instructions are for doing everything. It would be like, you know, losing half of the instructions to building a house. All right. Well, if you lose part of the instructions and you don't build the house right, the house will collapse. Okay. So it's pretty important to keep your DNA intact. So this arrow here that's pointing just inside the big structure is the nucleus. Okay. The nucleus is not a brain. I know that along the way, some good-meaning person told you the nucleus is the brain of the cell. It's not a brain, okay? It doesn't make any conscious decisions. It doesn't actively control anything. It just stores DNA, okay? That's where all the information is. If it's anything, it's a library, okay? But it's not a brain. It's not a freaking brain. If you write brain of the cell, I will give you a big fat 0, okay? In the whole course. Don't write brain of the cell. Okay, it's not a brain. Okay. Inside the center of the nucleus is something called the nucleolus. It's usually a much darker dot in the middle. The nucleolus is the librarian. Okay, if the nucleus is the library, the nucleolus is the librarian. It knows how to get the information out of the DNA. And as a result, it actually does control something. Okay? It controls protein synthesis. Your cell constantly asks the nucleus for instructions. We need to build this stuff. We need to build that stuff. The nucleolus knows where to find it. Okay, so what it does is it goes into the DNA and it finds the part of the DNA that codes for making that, and it makes a copy of it. Okay, so the nucleolus actually copies your DNA and sends the copy out into the cell, not the original. Okay? The original is always kept in the nucleus, but a copy goes out. Okay? And then it doesn't matter whether that copy comes back or not. Right? In fact, most of the time it doesn't come back. Right? So that's nucleolus. Now, these are two structures, though, guys, where spelling counts. Okay? If we're labeling the cell, you need to spell nucleus and nucleolus right because they're kind of close. And sometimes I have people who aren't certain, so they go, "Oh, he'll feel sorry for me." I don't. I won't feel sorry for you. That'll just be wrong. Okay, nucleolus or nucleus. Okay, they are different. Okay, make sure that you spell it right. Okay, this one here is pointing at the little black dots. Okay, don't label it little black dots. Okay, these are ribosomes. The ribosomes are what make protein. Okay, so the nucleolus sends the instructions to them. Okay, and they build the proteins that the cell is asking for. Okay, we didn't even know about ribosomes until we invented the electron microscope. They are incredibly tiny. Okay, in fact, most of the stuff you see on this diagram you can't see with our microscopes. Okay. Liam. But it doesn't make active decisions. It finds the information and copies it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, like say, like a librarian. Find here's the information you want. I'll give you a copy of it. Okay. And kind of that's it. Okay. All right. Then we've got this stuff here, which usually is attached top or bottom or both, okay, to the nucleus, and this is the rough ER, or rough endoplasmic reticulum. Okay? It's covered in ribosomes. Right? That's why we want it really close to the nucleus. That way the copied DNA doesn't have to travel very far to get turned into proteins. Okay? So this stuff is really close. And what it does is it transports the proteins that are made by the ribosomes that are all over it. Okay, that's why it's called rough. It looks rough, okay, because it's covered in these little bumps, which are ribosomes. Okay, we can abbreviate that ER. Okay, so it would be rough ER. Okay, you don't have to write endoplasmic reticulum each time. Okay, so this stuff you can actually see through the microscope. It often looks like the nucleus has a beard. I'm not kidding you. Like if the nucleus is a face, this looks like a goatee, okay, at the bottom oftentimes. So, okay, that's what you kind of can look for that. All right, this part here that goes all around the outside of the cell is the cell membrane. Okay, and the cell membrane controls what gets in and out of the cell. Doesn't always do a great job of it, but for the most part it does. Okay, it controls what gets in and out of the cell, which we call endocytosis and exocytosis. Okay? Cytosis is about cells, so endo is into the cell, exo is out of the cell. Right? So it controls those two processes. Okay, if this stuff looks rough, this stuff by comparison would be smooth. So this is smooth ER. Okay, smooth ER next to the nucleus is probably the most important organelle in the cell. It has many jobs, okay? Detoxifying poisons that are in the cell, breaking down starches, making hormones, making lipids. Lipids is a huge job because your cell membrane and all of your organelles are made out of lipids, which are fats. Okay, it synthesizes these and repairs membranes and things like that. So it's a really, really important organelle. What's that? I wouldn't go so far as a factory because it's only making that one thing. But yeah, it's pretty important though. All right, this thing here is the Golgi apparatus. Okay, and the Golgi apparatus has to do with the excretion of wastes. Okay, so any waste products, especially toxic things that have been broken down by the smooth ER, will go to it and be packaged into a vesicle, which is a bubble, which can get outside the cell. Okay, so it's the garbage man of the cell. Okay. And then this stuff here, this is the lysosome. Okay, so it looks like a peroxisome except it's got food in it, so there's digestion going on in there. And then lastly, these two things are the centrioles. Right? And the centrioles help with cell division. They make sure all the DNA gets into the right side of the cell when the cell divides. Because the first thing a cell has to do when it's going to divide is make sure it copies every last bit of DNA so that the two daughter cells will have all the DNA that's necessary. If there's a problem with that, one of the cells will die, or both of them will die. Okay, one or the other. It's pretty serious. The copying of DNA is crucially important. In fact, that's where a lot of genetic disorders come from. The very first division of the cell, or maybe even one of the gametes, the egg or the sperm, has a mistake in the DNA, and that can cause genetic disorders, like, for example, like Down syndrome. Okay, an extra chromosome is carried by one of the two gametes, and then all the cells after that have this extra chromosome, and that can cause some pretty serious implications. So, okay, those are pretty important. All right, tomorrow you will have a quiz. It will be on cell theory, not labeling. Okay, it'll be on cell theory and maybe modes of nutrition. Okay, but not on labeling.